Yukio, run!
Logan.
Cyborg wins.
Cybernetic warriors do not intimidate me.
Stand back. There's no need.
Where is she? Where's Mariko? Where is she?
Where's Mariko? Still pining away. So sweet. Impressive, no? He's made of adamantium, just like you. Oh, Logan, you know what? I get it. You're frustrated.
I know she's here. I want to see her.
You want answers.
Yes, I want answers.
I'm sorry. I wish I could say more, but I was hired in part for my discretion.
No, I'm sure you were.
That, and a certain talent for combining biochemistry and metaphysics. High-grade toxins are my specialty. Of course, it helps to be genetically immune to every poison known to man as I am. And immune to the toxin that is man himself. As I am.
I tell you what, you twisted mutant bitch. When did you open these bracelets? And we'll see who's made of what.
The claws. Now we can begin.
思いを寄せてるかもしれない。でも忘れろ。お前は決してできない人間なんだ。
こんなおじいさんに裏切ったってあなたもそうってことでしょ。
違うマリコ。俺たちは幼馴染だろ。俺は信じてくれ。
ほらそこをどいて下に行かなきゃ。彼はあなたに何もしてないじゃない。私の命を救ってくれたのよ。
すぐ忘れろマリコ。俺も辛いんだ。でも俺はお前のおじいさんの計画に従う。
The suppressor bug you found inside of you was mine. You took it out on your own. I didn't see that coming.
バイバーが危険なのは俺も知ってる。でもあいつはお前のおじいさんの願いを叶えるまでの駒だ。心配するな。
You are strong. You have courage. Real courage. But that won't help much now.
Brainiac thought he had me all figured out. Said my humanity made me weak. I'm fighting through.
all weapon against him, Logan.
Come on. This is not the way.
Superman may trust you to be tied
up. Now you die.
Today's not my day.
Listen, don't look so shocked. With you at my side, I survived Nagasaki. Surely I could survive this. It's all right. It won't take long. Dr. Green and I have been waiting. It's only this armor that's kept me alive. We built it to make me strong, so I can take what you would not give and transfer your unwanted healing to my body. My legacy must be preserved. Your mistake was to believe that a life without end can have no meaning. It is the only life that can. Hold on. We're almost there. The peace you've wanted. Your reward. You know I'm giving you the very death you longed for.
本物の化け物はあなたよ。
Mariko, it's me, your grandfather.
I buried my grandfather.
Say goodbye. Sayonara. You all right?
Better hope you got good defense.
Your primitive technology can't harm me.
Oh God.
Jury's still out on that.
Begin.
That's how it's done in Motown.
Of course.
Can you stay?
I can't.
Yes, you can.
Cyborg wins. Not anymore.
I'm all alone here. You put me here.
You were hurting people, Gene. I had to. I love you, Gene. Begin. I always will.
All humans are beneath me. I'm above you.
寂しくなるわ。たった一人の家族なんだから。
元気でね、お姉ちゃん。
Cyborg wins.
Am I wrong to think you might visit me soon? Stay.
I can't, Princess. I'm a soldier, and I've been hiding too long.
In our business profile tonight, Mariko Yashida, a two-generation passing of the torch in the Yashida family, as Mariko Yashida takes the helm from her grandfather who built this tech giant.
I know it will always be the goal of your corporation to make profits, but Yashida Industries believes we can also work with our
Begin.
So, have you decided?
Gotcha, Air Force Law.
What?
Mariko said we can go wherever we want. Just say where.
What are you doing?
I'm your bodyguard. So, where do you want to go?
I'm almost embarrassed.
Let's just start with up.
And then?
We'll see.
Interesting.
Cyborg.
Leading mind. With cutting-edge technology and the world's leading minds, we're on the front lines, keeping you healthy, keeping you safe. Trask Industries, solving tomorrow's problems today.
I'll take the pad now.
Opt out. You can go ahead, sir.
All right.
What do you want?
There are dark forces, Wolverine. Human forces building a weapon that could bring about the end of our kind. I want your help.
Why would I trust you?
You wouldn't.
Professor.
Cyborg wins.
Hello, Logan.
How is this possible?
As I told you a long time ago, you're not the only one with
You
gifts.
were staying out of it.
I have changed my mind.
Flip-flopping's gonna cost you, Swamp Thing.
Begin.
You should fear nature.
I still got game.
Cyborg wins.
Hey, are you thinking about watching the new Deadpool movie, but you've forgotten what happened in all the other X-Men films? Well, no problem. Here's a quick catch-up. These films are big-budget blockbuster examinations of racism and homophobia in America.
Mutant and proud.
But sometimes the stories veer a little too close to being a soap opera. The first film opens in a World War II concentration camp when this kid freaks out and bends metal with his mind. His name is Eric, but he'll grow up to be the villain Magneto. Years later in Washington, a geneticist named Jean Grey is speaking against mutant registration while a senator stirs up a lot of anti-mutant bigotry, kind of like the Red Scare. There's even a list of names.
Is that symbolic?
Elsewhere, there's a girl named Rogue who finds out she's a mutant by accidentally absorbing a boy's memories after kissing him. Rogue is unable to touch anyone without absorbing their memories and powers. She runs away and meets a cage fighter named Logan, also nicknamed Wolverine. He has amnesia but can't give himself any memento tattoos because his mutant healing factor would erase them. He also has a metal skeleton, heightened senses, and badass claws. He and Rogue are ambushed by a mutant named Sabretooth, who has a lot of the same powers as Wolverine, and it's implied they have a backstory. Learn about that later? You betcha. A couple good guys bring them to a special mutant school where Jean Grey works. The school is run by Charles Xavier, who can read and control people's minds and dreams of living in peace with humans. He used to be friends with Magneto, who now thinks that humans should be subjugated by mutants. Magneto leads a group called the Brotherhood of Mutants, who includes Sabretooth, Toad, and Mystique. Back at the school, Wolverine wakes up and meets the mutant teachers there, who are also the X-Men, a global strike force with an underground bunker, a secret jet, and uniforms that look like body condoms. Wolverine flirts with Jean Grey, hates her boyfriend Scott, and there's also Halle Berry Storm, who can control the weather. Rogue joins the school and makes nice with a boy named Bobby, who controls ice. Meanwhile, Magneto's evil plan is to use his powers to turn all the world's leaders into mutants while they're all visiting the Statue of Liberty, and also, hey, here's Stan Lee's first cameo. Anyways, Rogue runs away from the school, and they catch up to her at a train station, but Magneto and his goons are there too, and they beat up the X-Men and take Rogue because actually Magneto needed Rogue to implement his evil plan. They all put on their condom suits and go after Magneto. Storm fights Toad and unleashes this zinger.
You know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing happens to everything else.
Which was actually written by Joss Whedon, who also wrote the blockbusters Justice League and Alien Resurrection. Wolverine fights Mystique while she poses a bunch of times, then he fights Sabretooth and saves the day. Afterwards, Logan hits the road to look for answers to his past, Magneto's in a plastic prison, and Mystique is impersonating a senator. Next, there's X2, X-Men United. It's a high watermark for the franchise. A teleporting mutant named Nightcrawler attacks the president in the Oval Office, so General William Stryker gets permission to attack Xavier's school. Logan hits dead ends in his search for his past, so he returns to babysit while Scott and the professor go visit Magneto, and Jean and Storm search for Nightcrawler. It turns out he's a former circus performer who was mind-controlled by Stryker into attacking the president. Stryker attacks the school, and the kids are helped by Colossus, a big guy who turns into metal. Wolverine straight up murders a bunch of guys while the military round up most of the kids. It turns out that Stryker knows Logan, but Logan has no memory of him. They escape with Rogue, Iceman, and a cocky young mutant named Pyro. They go to Iceman's house where he comes out to his parents as being a mutant.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
Is that symbolic?
Pyro attacks some cops until Jean, Storm, and Nightcrawler interfere, and while all this is happening, Stryker kidnaps Scott and Xavier. Stryker uses his son's mutant ability to control people's minds, including the professor's. Mystique breaks Magneto out of jail, and they save the X-Men from a plane crash. Now the good guys have to team up with the bad guys to stop the greatest threat of all: the bigotry inside the human heart. Mystique and Nightcrawler have this badass interaction.
They say you can imitate anybody, then why not stay in disguise all the time?
Because we shouldn't have to.
Symbolism.
Jean and Logan make out for a minute, but she confirms that she really loves Scott.
Papa John's new garlic epic stuffed crust pizza.
On it, with it.
Order now on the app for $13.99.
Precious saute, swagger all night.
They figure out that Stryker's plan is to use Xavier and a duplicate of Cerebro to kill every mutant in the world. They track him down to the same base Logan searched earlier, but this time they think to look underground. Look in the basement next time, look in the basement next time. They infiltrate the base, but Logan goes off to find the chamber where Stryker laced his skeleton with adamantium. He fights Lady Deathstrike, whose claws are slightly smaller than Cardi B's, and wins by filling her up with metal.
Is that symbolic?
They rescue the kids, and Scott is mind-controlled into fighting Jean, but then there's flames in her eyes, and she undoes the brainwashing. So what's that about? Well, wait and see. Also, you can actually see the team's earpieces in this movie, unlike in the Avengers. Magneto shuts down Cerebro, but then turns heel and uses the machine against humans. The X-Men save the professor, Pyro joins Magneto, and Jean sacrifices her life to save everyone. The movie ends with the flaming outline of a bird under the water. So what's that about? Well, next up is X-Men 3, The Last Stand, which, I can't believe I'm saying this, is not as bad as I remember. Rewind to a flashback with young Charles and Magneto meeting a young Jean Grey and teaching her to use her powers. And let's give a shout out to Weta, because this is a great job de-aging these guys. Fantastic work. Proud of you. Now, fast Fast forward again to another flashback to 10 years ago of a wealthy boy named Warren Worthington who's growing angel wings. Like in the movie Teen Wolf, the manifestation of mutants' powers serve as a metaphor for puberty.
What the hell are you doing in the bathroom day and night?
During the training exercise, we get a fastball special and meet Ellen Page's Shadowcat, who phases through walls. And Rogue is jealous, and she thinks that Bobby likes Shadowcat more because they can actually touch. And she's probably right. Meanwhile, at the government, there's a Department of Mutant Affairs now where we meet Hank McCoy, the Beast, old friend of the X-Men and current cabinet secretary. Scott is really sad about Jean's death, so Professor X wants Storm to take over someday, and because Halle Berry was a much more bankable star than James Marsden. Scott goes back to the place where Jean died to scream at the water, but then she comes back to life. How? Telekinetic cocoon, but she's evil now and kills Scott with kisses. It turns out that Jean is the most powerful mutant ever, but had an alternate personality called the Phoenix that was so evil the professor created mental blocks to keep it in check. Meanwhile, Beast tells the X-Men that Worthington's company has made a drug that cures mutant powers, and Rogue is all like, ooh, I want to kiss my boyfriend now. Warren's dad wants to try the mutant cure out on him, but he refuses and flies away.
Carry on my wayward son.
In an underground Blade Club, mutants argue about the cure, and Magneto recruits a shitload of them to join his Brotherhood. The Brotherhood breaks Mystique and a few other mutants out of jail, including the Juggernaut.
I'm the Juggernaut!
But the cops shoot Mystique with the cure, and now Magneto is like, ew, humans, gross. But really, when she's normal, she still gets to look like Rebecca Romaine, so that's not a bad life. Jean wakes up, and now she's all hot for Logan, which is super up because she just killed her fiancé about 10 minutes ago.
Watch out, boy, she'll shoot you up.
Her evil side takes over, and Charles and Magneto both try to recruit her, but she joins Magneto's team and pops the professor like a balloon. Afterwards, Storm becomes leader of the X-Men, Warren enrolls in the school, and Rogue runs off to get cured. Magneto's army attacks Alcatraz, and oh man, the Golden Gate Bridge has no luck in movies. The X-Men show up, and there's a big fight, while Jean stands on a hill and doesn't attack for literally no reason. Warren saves his dad,
Carry on my wayward son.
while Beast and Logan pump the cure into Magneto, turning him into a human, which is a nice reversal of the first movie when he tried to turn humans into mutants. But Jean is still like mad evil, and she peels the flesh off Wolverine's bones, and he's forced to kill her. Rogue loses her powers, Magneto kind of gets his powers back, and in Marvel's first post-credits scene, Professor X transfers his mind into his comatose twin brother's brain-dead body. Next up, we're going to rewind to the year 1845, where two boys named James and Victor live on a large estate. James is wealthy, and Victor is the son of the groundskeeper, who then kills James's dad. James grows bone claws, kills him right back, and finds out that the groundskeeper was his real dad, and Victor is his half-brother. And they run away together, and then we get an incredibly kick-ass montage where these two superpowered immortals fight 100 years worth of wars. In Vietnam, Victor takes out a superior officer. They survive a firing squad and are recruited by young William Stryker, who's putting together a special team of mutants. One of them is a mouthy sword-wielding assassin called Wade Wilson. Logan eventually walks away from killing. Fast forward 6 years later, and he's working as a lumberjack. He's also living with a nice woman who I bet lives a really long life. Never mind, Victor killed her. Stryker shows up and says, I can make you indestructible. Then he pumps Logan full of adamantium in a scene that looks a lot like David Fincher directed the first Avenger. He freaks out, meets a nice farm couple, they die, and his claws look about as realistic as the singing sword from Roger Rabbit. Logan goes around meeting a bunch of different mutants and saying things like, oh hey Blob, what's up Gambit?
Thanks, Buddy Holly. Dang, Elvis Presley.
And Stryker kidnaps all of these potential spin-offs for experiments. Logan finds out that Victor was actually working for Stryker all along, and so was his girlfriend, and she never actually loved him. Then Wade, the funny, charming, handsome mutant from earlier, comes back as this guy, and Stryker calls him Deadpool because he's a pool of dead people's powers. That's terrible. Logan fights Deadpool, really boring? Yes it is, and everyone is saved. Stryker shoots Logan in the head with an adamantium bullet, so now he has amnesia. The kids are freed, and they meet young Charles like, oh my god, who did this? Who did this effect? Hydraulics? No, this is why you only hire quality people like Weta. Now let's rewind again, back to young Magneto bending metal in the concentration camp. A mutant Nazi named Sebastian Shaw teaches little Magneto to use his powers through anger. Meanwhile, in Westchester, young Charles Xavier meets young Mystique, and they grow up to be the best of friends. Fast forward to the 1960s, and Charles is now reading girls' minds to get them into bed. He's soon contacted by Moira McTaggart, a CIA agent who wants to stop the Hellfire Club, a group of evil mutants who are led by Sebastian Shaw. Shaw wants to start nuclear war because evil. Meanwhile, Magneto is traveling around the world and hunting down Nazis. He finds Shaw, gets his ass kicked, but Charles and the others show up to save him. Now the whole group join the CIA's mutant division where the Beast works, but he has kept his mutation a secret.
Didn't ask, so I didn't tell.
Is that symbolic?
Magneto and Charles form a reluctant friendship, and they recruit mutants using Cerebro. Everyone then goes to Charles' Westchester house and learns learns to use their powers. Magneto and Mystique hook up, and Hank's experiments on himself backfire. The X-Men stop the Cuban Missile Crisis. Magneto kills Shaw, but then goes heel and turns the missiles on the humans. Classic Magneto. Charles stops him, but takes a bullet in the spine. Magneto leaves with Mystique and a few other followers. Later, Charles erases Moira's memory with a super kiss stolen from Superman 2? Yes. Alright, let's rewind again to the end of World War II, where Wolverine is a prisoner of war in Japan. As the atomic bomb goes off, he saves the life of a Japanese soldier named Yoshida. Fast forward to present day, and he's having night terrors after killing Jean. He gets pissed at some hicks for killing his favorite bear, and a young woman shows up to bring him back to Japan. She's a mutant named Yukio, and her power is to see how people will die. She works for the same soldier whose life Logan saved, but now he's the most powerful businessman in Japan. The old man offers to take away Logan's curse of immortality and use it for himself. Logan turns him down, but still loses his powers in the tradition of great superhero sequels like Spider-Man 2 and Superman 2. The next day, Yoshida is dead. Foul play isn't suspected, but it sure looks like this lady, Dr. Viper, is up to something, mostly because her name is Dr. Viper. And there's a lot going on here, with a conspiracy involving the government, the Yakuza, ninjas, Yoshida's disinherited son, and everyone is trying to kill his granddaughter, Mariko. Logan goes on the run with Mariko, and eventually the two fall for one another. And the next morning, Logan is able to bust out those lumberjack skills. Yukio comes back because she saw a vision of Logan's death. Mariko is kidnapped, and Logan destroys a robot that was on his heart, sucking away his powers. They track Mariko to the ninja compound, shout out to Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, where Dr. Viper is building an adamantium armor with the old man Yoshida inside. It turns out he wasn't really dead, and he was actually behind everything all along. What? He tries to steal Logan's powers, cuts off his claws, but his granddaughter stabs him in the head. Logan used to view his power as a curse, but now he sees it as an opportunity to be a champion for life. Fast forward a couple years, and Wolverine encounters Magneto and the Professor at an airport, and they're all like, oh, we need your help, man. So fast forward again by a decade or so to the future, when mutants are being hunted down by robots called the Sentinels. Xavier and Magneto lead a band of survivors, including Wolverine and other people you'll recognize from the first 3 movies. They work up a plan to send Wolverine's consciousness back into the past to stop the dystopia from happening. Back in the 1970s, the inventor of the Sentinels, Bolivar Trask, who used to look like this but now looks like this, was assassinated by Mystique, and they used her DNA to make these killer robots. So rewind to the 1970s when Logan shows up at the X-Mansion, but instead of teaching kids, Professor X is dressed like Eric Stoltz from Pulp Fiction and injecting himself with a drug that dampens his powers and helps him walk. Mystique is in Vietnam, saving mutants from being sent to Trask at a young William Stryker who used to look like this and now looks like this. Toad is there, remember him? They need Magneto's help to find Mystique, and so they recruit a mutant with super speed named Quicksilver to break him out of jail in what has to be the best scene in any X-Men film. Magneto and Charles still aren't cool with each other. They stop Mystique, but Magneto heel turns, classic Magneto, and the dystopian future is still happening. Trask convinces Nixon to make Sentinels, which Magneto uses to attack the president at the White House. Mystique stops the assassination, prevents a dystopian future. Logan wakes up in Xavier's school to find that Scott and Jean are alive. So nothing in The Last Stand ever happened, so forget that. And Logan is fished out of the river by Stryker, so I guess he wasn't in Vietnam and didn't become a lumberjack and see his fake girlfriend killed. None of that happened either. Wait, did any of this stuff happen? Any of it from any of these movies. I guess everything from now on is part of
an alternate reality.
So now let's rewind again to ancient Egypt, which is ruled by an immortal power-stealing mutant named Apocalypse. While trying to take on a new body, he's attacked and ends up being buried for a few thousand years until fast forward to 1983 when he's unearthed by Moira McTaggart. Now he looks like a Power Rangers villain and begins recruiting mutants to be his 4 horsemen, including Storm, Psylocke, and Warren Worthington, even though Warren was this exact same age 20 years later in another movie.
An alternate reality.
Magneto lives a quiet life with his family in the woods. Don't worry, nothing bad happens to them, and he doesn't have a role in this film at all. Just kidding, humans kill them, and he retaliates by killing a bunch of dude, and he's recruited by Apocalypse. Moira reconnects with Charles and fills him in on who Apocalypse is. Mystique saves Nightcrawler from an underground fighting club and brings him to Xavier's school. And I know that earlier in the future they met for the first time, but
an alternate reality.
Meanwhile, a young Scott Summers' powers manifest, and his brother Alex takes him to Xavier's school, and no one has aged at all in the past 20 years. Scott meets Jean Grey, they sneak off to the mall and come back just as the school is exploding. Quicksilver saves everyone, but Apocalypse kidnaps Charles, and Stryker shows up to start grabbing mutant kids because that's what Strikers do. These plucky mutant teens stow away to Stryker's facility from all the other movies. They free the kids, stop Stryker, and release Wolverine. Apocalypse has a big dumb evil plan to end the world that also makes the Professor go bald. The X-Men stop him with a little help from Jean Grey's Phoenix side, and Magneto decides not to kill billions of people because Mystique asked him not to. The X-Men rebuild the school with help from Magneto. You know, that mass murderer from earlier in the movie. And director Bryan Singer ends his last X-Men film the way he ended his first X-Men film.
I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to my school looking for trouble.
There's There's a post-credit scene where the government steals Wolverine's blood, which leads directly into Logan. Fast forward to about the year 2027, which is no longer the Matrix-type dystopia we saw before, but more like a sad Cormac McCarthy-esque dystopia where mutants are slowly dying out. Logan is now a cab driver and is slowly being poisoned by his adamantium skeleton. He's looking after Charles, who takes drugs to suppress his dementia and seizures. A lady pays Logan to smuggle a little girl named Laura to Canada, and it turns out that Laura is a mutant too, taken from a hospital where she and other kids were genetically created from the DNA of the X-Men. The military shows up and everyone sees that Laura has Wolverine's powers, making her his daughter. The paramilitary guys attack and Charles, Laura, and Logan go on the run. They end up staying at a family farm just like Logan did all those years ago.
An alternate reality.
Unfortunately, it ends up the same way. It's revealed that Charles' psychic seizures killed his students, and then he's murdered by a savage clone of young Wolverine who symbolizes the hero's struggle with the demons of his past. The villains are led by a bad guy named Xander Rice. Years ago, he introduced a chemical into corn syrup to suppress mutations so he would have sole control of all the world's mutants. And sidebar, Rice's dad was killed when Logan first escaped Alkali Lake, bringing the franchise full circle and playing off the concept of original sin. Logan brings Laura to the other young mutants and they give him a drug to help amplify his powers to temporarily make him savage enough to help them get away. Logan dies defending Laura, echoing this prophecy.
I see you on your back. There's blood everywhere. You're holding your own heart in your hand.
And what a fitting end to the X-Men franchise. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. Post-credits, finally we have Deadpool. We originally met him in 1975, and now it's modern day and he's the same age, but remember, we are in
an alternate reality.
Wade Wilson is a badass assassin who falls in love with a woman named Vanessa. Everything is great until he gets terminal cancer. He volunteers for an experiment run by a guy named Francis who loves to torture Wade. Afterwards, Wade is basically invincible, but he looks like a slightly more attractive Randy Johnson. So he doesn't want Vanessa to see him and he hunts down Francis to undo the procedure. He lives with a lady named Blind Al, and his friend Weasel gives him his superhero name from a fighting tournament called the Deadpool at his bar. On the way to catch up with Francis, Deadpool meets Dopinder, who has a convoluted backstory straight from a Bollywood film involving his wicked cousin kidnapping his true love. Anyways, Deadpool almost kills Francis, but Colossus and another X-Man named Negasonic Teenage Warhead stop him. Oh, and Colossus has a Russian accent now. Francis kidnaps Vanessa, Deadpool kills Francis, and Vanessa doesn't mind his ugly face, and the X-Men franchise is reborn, until Marvel regains the rights and all of this is erased and we get to start all over. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
The Mobile Made Free event from Comcast Business. Get a free line of mobile with internet powered by the next generation 10G network.
Get started for just $39 a month. Plus, ask how to get one free line of unlimited mobile. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
One sheet of Bounty versus one sheet of the ordinary brand. One sheet of Bounty.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted
Strange in the Multiverse of Madness
and assorted mutants weren't enough.
Welcome back, Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness just introduced Professor X into the MCU.
We should tell him the truth.
It's Patrick Stewart, all right, though it's unclear if this is the same Xavier from Fox's X-Men movies or a completely new variant.
McAvoy or Stewart? These timelines are so confusing.
So, does this mean that the X-Men will be introduced in the MCU through the multiverse? Are the Fox movies going to be part of the MCU's canon, or is it going to be just another soft reboot? Well, I mean, look, if Hugh Jackman's back as Wolverine, I'm game. But that being said, I gotta be honest, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of mutants being introduced in this way. There's nothing wrong with it, I mean, it sure makes sense, but as cool as it sounds on paper, I have some doubts about it. I think that Xavier and Doctor Strange 2 will only be a cameo, and that mutants already exist in the MCU. We just haven't met any of them yet. I know what you're thinking, but trust me, I got a theory. But if the X-Men are sharing the same universe with the Avengers, where are they? I mean, it's like Marvel can just say the mutants have always been around, like they were just hiding in that bush over there, right? Well, maybe that's exactly how it's going to happen.
What?
Marvel Studios have proven that the simplest solution is almost always the best, meaning that there's no need for an elaborate explanation on where the mutants have been all these years. Instead, keep it simple and focus on what matters, the characters.
It's right, dude. The beauty of this is its simplicity. Once the plan gets too complex, everything can go wrong.
Yeah, this might sound like a huge cop-out, but the thing people always want to see is the X-Men interacting with other heroes. We want the team-ups and crossovers. We want to see Wolverine fight Hulk and in Avengers vs. X-Men. So let's talk about how the X-Men will join the MCU, and more importantly, how their story should be implemented. The X-Men have one of the greatest ensemble casts of all time, right up there with one of my favorite shows, The Walking Dead. And speaking of The Walking Dead, this video is sponsored by Walking Dead. Now, I don't normally get into these kind of games, but No Man's Land is I try not to end up like so much Otis, tied directly to the events of the ongoing TV season. It's like experiencing the show on a whole new level. You can also team up with the whole No Man. You get 40. There are certain things in Marvel Studios. You get 40 Daryl tokens and his crossbow for free. Back to X-Men.
Enough yapping. Let's do this.
Here's the thing about the MCU. There are certain things that Marvel Studios doesn't bother explaining because there's no need to. For example, the 10 rings. We know they're ancient, very powerful, and that Wenwu used them for hundreds of years. But we don't know where the rings came from. Marvel didn't bother to go into it, probably because that part wasn't important for Shang-Chi's story. Exposition is usually pretty boring.
This is Katana. She's got my back.
1 hour later.
She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn.
5 hours later.
Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
And non-comic fans, who comprise the majority of the audience, don't really care about stuff like the origins of the 10 rings. If it's not important to the hero's journey, then why should the audience even think about it?
Just give me the facts.
Just the facts. Only the facts.
Breathe. Focus. Keep it simple.
No doubt.
The simplest explanation is that mutants have always been around. Now this will surely create questions like, where were the mutants all this time? Why no one mentioned them till now? Why didn't they fight Thanos?
Don't try to understand it. Treat it.
We shouldn't overthink these things too much. It's like when Marvel introduced the Masters of the Mystic Arts in Doctor Strange. No one batted an eye about the reveal that there are suddenly thousands of sorcerers in the MCU. Same with the Eternals, Spider-Man, Wakanda, Captain Marvel, Black Widow's family, and everything else that expanded the scope of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think that's what's going to happen with the X-Men. In the end, what matters the most is the characters and the story. And the X-Men have some of the best characters and stories ever created in comics.
You read these in your spare time? Oh yeah, Charles, we got ourselves an X-Men fan.
Now to clarify, I do think that Marvel should give us some explanation on mutants and their sudden reveal, but it should be something simple, nothing too elaborate like reality warping events or the multiverse. I don't hate the idea of mutants coming from another universe. In fact, with Multiverse of Madness, that actually makes sense, especially if the multiverses are headed into a collision. But it's also too convoluted and gimmicky, since the X-Men story would become too tied into the multiverse stuff instead of being unique on its own.
I'm Dr. Stephen Strange. I need you to come with me.
Go yourself, pretty boy.
Also, the mutants should share the same history with the rest of the heroes, because it will lead to better and more interesting stories in the long run. And yes, I'm aware of the theory that the snap or the blip created the mutants, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, I don't want to counter everything I said with a theory, but just for the sake of throwing ideas out there, here's my own possible explanation for mutants.
Let's do this.
Maybe in the past there were a lot more mutants in the world, but then, early in the 20th century, mutants were discovered by evil supremacists like the Nazis or Hydra or some other group of terrible people. And many of the mutants were kidnapped and taken to Genosha, where they faced segregation as slaves. Genosha is Marvel's allegory for South African apartheid. The mutants on the island were slaves and were treated in horrendous ways by the human ruling class.
The leader has promised that you mutants will be released once this dam is built. But if you try to escape, you will never leave Genosha.
So, here's our idea. Most of mutant kind was kept on Genosha. At some point, the mutants rebelled and tried to escape. This uprising caused the humans in charge of Genosha to clean house and exterminate all the mutants. The Genosha Holocaust could explain the absence of mutants and why no one knew about them. The whole thing was kept quiet and got swept under history's bloody rug. But not all the mutants died on Genosha. Some survived, others were never taken there, and mutants kept being born even after the genocide. But they have all chosen to live in hiding ever since.
Anonymity is a mutant's first defense against the world's hostility.
Now maybe Magneto is a survivor of Genosha, and that's his updated origins in the MCU. But I don't think Magneto's origins need to be altered. He should remain Jewish and a Holocaust survivor. It's an important part of who he is. That event defines him and explains his actions and philosophy, something we're actually going to explore soon in our upcoming Magneto is Right video.
You built these weapons to destroy us. Why? because you are afraid of our gifts. Humanity has always feared that which is different.
And yes, it means Magneto will be 100 years old. But come on, this is the MCU. You want to tell me that with all this technology, magic, and everything in between, someone like Magneto wouldn't find a way to keep himself young and healthy?
Bullet wounds don't just magically heal overnight.
They do here.
His life's mission is to fight for mutants. He wouldn't allow himself to die before he achieved it. Anyway, Genosha or some other terrible genocide dwindled the mutants' population from thousands to a few hundred just around the world. But then there was an event that changed that. Maybe it's the snap or the blip. So basically, humans carry this X gene in their DNA, and the cosmic energy of the stones activates the X gene, causing a rapid evolution and mutation. Also, it sort of fits thematically, as the snap represents the end of the Infinity Saga, but it's also the catalyst that creates new stories for the new saga. The MCU's Earth is filled with all kinds of super people, so I guess mutants can easily hide in plain sight, especially with the big three.
What big three? Androids, aliens, and wizards.
But mutants are much more than that, which leads me to how they should be incorporated. Mutants are not just a few individuals with powers, they are a race of people. And that's just a powder keg waiting to happen. Once humans learn about the mutants, it's inevitable that this knowledge will create discrimination and bigotry.
The truth is that mutants are very real, and they are among us. We must know who they are, and above all, we must know what they can do.
These things will always happen. It's part of what makes the X-Men story so fascinating and relevant, even in the fantastical world of the MCU. But none of this works without great characters, and X-Men have them in droves. That's one of the biggest problems with Fox's X-Men movies. They never had the time to go deep into many of the best X-Men characters. Wolverine and a few others got the spotlight, while amazing characters like Cyclops never got the respect they deserved.
It's me. Prove it. You're a dick.
Okay. Alright, we need to stop this video for a moment because I'm personally offended by the mistreatment of Cyclops in all the X-Men movies. This won't stand. Scott Summers is not some uptight, boring, jealous boyfriend who just shoots lasers from his eyes.
This is unacceptable.
If the MCU must do one thing with the X-Men, it is bring justice to Cyclops. Scott Summers is one of the best X-Men characters, serving as the balance between the ideals of Professor X and Magneto. He's a natural-born leader and respected by all of his teammates, even by Wolverine. Cyclops is one of the best X-Men ever. He is the heart of the team. He isn't a Boy Scout. He does what's right. Actually, he's a lot like the MCU's Steve Rogers, though he's much harsher, and that makes him so interesting. Cyclops represents the biggest conflict of the X-Men and mutants as a whole. He is the leader of the X-Men, so every choice he makes affects the rest of the team. He's such a complicated and fascinating character, and his powers embody that, because the energy that is released from his eyes is almost limitless, so he must always be in control of his powers and himself. And that's not lasers, his eyes are portals shooting energy from other dimensions. Cyclops can easily become as essential to the X-Men stories as Captain America was to the Avengers.
How do we do this?
As a team.
If we do this, we do it as a team.
And this is not just me fanboying about Cyclops. Go down the list of the X-Men, and most of them are some of the most unique, fascinating, and colorful individuals in comics. So it's just a gold mine of storytelling. And this is why the MCU should not make an X-Men movie. What the shit? We need a Disney Plus show for the X-Men. Marvel is killing it with their shows. They are all as cinematic as any movie, and thanks to multiple hours, the shows are able to explore the characters with a kind of depth and care that's impossible in films. And then there's The Mandalorian, a show that single-handedly brought Star Wars back from the dead.
It's alive!
And the X-Men stories are perfectly suited to the long-form, character-driven narrative. You have countless characters with wonderful stories that can easily fill about 7 or 8 seasons. This way, all the great characters will get their time to shine, and all the complex issues could be explored in depth. And we've had some really amazing X-Men movies, but there's been even more stinkers. So it's time for a drastic change in how the X-Men stories are. And we've had some really amazing X-Men movies, but there's been even more stinkers. So it's time for a drastic change in how the X-Men stories are told, and shifting the X-Men to television is simply the perfect choice. Now, that's not to say we're not going to see the X-Men in movies. WandaVision and Loki both lead directly into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier established the story for Captain America 4. And it's not just the shows that tie into the movies. It would also be the reverse. With this kind of interconnectivity, the X-Men could easily appear in other movies and shows. Obviously, the X-Men will show up in big crossover events. I can see Wolverine showing up in a future Avengers movie. Also, at some point, we have to get an Avengers vs. X-Men movie. An awesome direction for it will be Dark Phoenix. Maybe Season 4 will adapt the Dark Phoenix saga, but then the climax of the story will involve the Avengers as the two teams clash, one trying to stop Jean while the other attempts to save her.
I'm trying something different. Maybe you should do the same.
I'm gonna cut your goddamn head off.
And whenever we have our next Endgame event, which is shaping up to be Secret Wars, all the X-Men will join in with all the other heroes for an epic team-up. Wolverine can be one of the characters that jump in between the show and other movies, like appearing in Captain America 4. And we can have a whole flashback to World War II and learn about Wolverine's origins, so we can see Logan saving Steve Rogers' life during a battle, and even forming a friendship with Bucky. And then, years later, when Logan becomes Weapon X, he actually fights the Winter Soldier, showing how these two friends were both brainwashed and used as weapons by evil humans. Maybe Logan recognized Bucky's scent, and thanks to their friendship, he breaks free from the Weapon X program. So that's a natural way to introduce Wolverine into the MCU. Insert the endless debate over which alloy is stronger, vibranium or adamantium.
Vibranium. The strongest metal on Earth.
The metal is an alloy called adamantium.
It's indestructible.
The answer is adamantium.
Oh, I don't care if it's me.
I would also love to see a team up between Wolverine and Spider-Man, because those two must cross paths at some point. Considering that Sony feels like they just have to give Spidey a mentor, maybe Logan might be Peter's new father figure in Spider-Man 4.
Well, I'm Spider-Man, and this is my trusty sidekick, Wolverine.
Don't push it, webhead.
Storm could appear in a future Black Panther movie, revealing that, like in the comics, she and T'Challa were lovers at one time. Depending on what Marvel does with T'Challa's character in the future, that could lead to Storm visiting Wakanda, either to mourn her former lover or pay respect to a king. Now, all signs point to Namor being in Black Panther 2, possibly as the villain. This means Wakanda goes to war with Atlantis, and maybe Namor unleashes a giant tsunami on the nation at some point. And Storm will be there using her powers to save Wakanda. Namor is also a mutant himself, and he's been part of the X-Men at a certain point in time. There's also the whole space side of the, and then there's Deadpool, who definitely needs his own movie. He reboots X-Men characters. This is also the team that we got in the wonderful 90s show. And honestly, that show should be the blueprint for Marvel. For the first few seasons, the story should focus on the X-Men dealing with their role in society as they face discrimination and suspicion from humanity. The story should start right around the time the world learns about mutants and explore how it all spirals into a conflict between mutants and humans. And
Okay, no, I honestly don't care.
Now that I'm out, your days are numbered.
I'll turn you into a newt.
Man, I hope not.